So, Ted, on the 729 Nitro, Hall and Nash attacked Arn Anderson, Marcus Bagwell, Scotty Riggs, and Rey Mysterio in the parking lot during a taping at Disney. This angle was apparently realistic enough that there was real emergency response called in. I mean, this is some absolute craziness. If you remember this, you weren't there yet, so I don't know if you were watching, but I mean, they were holding aluminum bats, but they dropped them as soon as the camera hit them because apparently that would be going too far on TV at that time. But it's a really realistic angle in wrestling during a time when, I mean, just in February of '96, Razor Ramon and 123 Kid had a crybaby match in the WWF. So, I mean, like all of a sudden, WCW is going the complete opposite direction with their creative and getting really, really kind of realistic and gritty. It marked a big transition in wrestling to a more gritty, adult-oriented product. What did you think of this change?
That's that's always been, and again, I'm that old school. I mean, I grew up in the business, and you understand. I mean, it's kind of like, okay, when you're a little kid and somebody tells you, okay, it's magic. I'm going to make this thing disappear, and they make it disappear. I mean, it's sleight of hand. You don't know how they did it, but you did. You believe it.
Hmm.
Well, we as in the wrestling industry understood. If you watch wrestling long enough and you've ever been in a real fight, there's a lot of things that you're going to say and you'll go, wait a minute. It's kind of like if if a guy grabs you by the head of the hair and runs you all the way across the ring into a turnbuckle. If you were in a real fight, could somebody actually grab you by the, if you didn't want to go, he might pull your hair out, but you're not going. So it's the realism, and the more realistic you can make it, the better. That's always been, and it was, like I don't know, I think it was Arn Anderson, because Arn was a producer for them for a lot longer. I mean, I tried to, and I just no, it wasn't me. I mean, to this point, it was hard for me to be a producer because I couldn't sit down with two guys and map out a whole match.
Right.
Why? Because I never did that.
You got to
I
feel the audience.
I mean, it's like I never did it, and if I never did it, how am I going to sit down and it's just it made no sense to me. That was the biggest problem. It's like now if I had history with a guy, if I had had a couple of matches with him, I might go, okay, based on what the people saw last week, maybe we should start this match tonight this way.
Right.
And of course, so I might know the very beginning of the match, and of course, the only other thing I knew was the finish, because the finish, whatever that finish is the hook to get you back the following week, and that's all I ever knew. So to sit down with two wrestlers and map out a match, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it, and to me, that's what's missing. I mean, it's kind of like, and I think Arnold told me, he said, Ted, he says Vince doesn't really like wrestling. And I went, what? He says, wrestling is kind of like the bastard child of the entertainment industry.
Hmm.
And he's always wanted to make it something more acceptable. And I went, I never thought of that, you know. And so let's like make this big soap opera out of it. And so you got, this going on in the ring, and then you cut away to confrontation in the locker room, and out on the street and whatever. And I can see where some of that is okay, but to make the whole show a soap opera, and which to me is the thing that everybody most, and here's totally, to this day I still have people come up to me, guys who are in their like 40s now, you know, who were little boys when when I was in my prime, um, and or who had been watching wrestling for a longer deal. And that, the thing they all say, the thing that's missing, it seems to be, is realism in the ring. In other words, it's kind of like, like a lot of the guys. I mean, I'll be honest with you. The last couple times I've watched any of the show, or the girls, the ladies division of the WWE, in my opinion, have more believable matches than the guys.
Hmm.
And I'm not the only one that feels that way. And it seems like, the guys go out there and it's almost like an acrobatic act. It's all high spots. It's, like a triple back somersault all over the top rope to the floor and bounce up like nothing happened to you.
Right.
Sell it. Nobody's selling anything anymore. So when you go into a movie, it's a movie. But what makes it real to you is the actors are so good at making you believe what they're doing is real. Well, it's the same thing with wrestling. Wrestling used to be wrestling, and it's like, two guys on the mat, and this guy's working a headlock, and the other guy's working an arm or a leg or whatever, and the story goes on, and it's back and it's forth, and then occasionally there's a high spot. That's why we call them high spots, because they were high spots. The whole match is not a high spot; it's a high spot. Anyway, I don't know how many of the fans listening are going to understand what I'm saying,
I think
but
they do. And look,
but
it's, to your point, fans, we all know that wrestling is work, but we want to suspend our disbelief. If you went to go see an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, let's say Terminator, and he's like gunning people down, and then all of a sudden he just turns to the camera and gives a wink, like all of a sudden you'd be like, hey, what the fuck? Like he took me right out of the moment,
yeah,
you know? you know? And
yeah,
that's kind of what some of these guys do nowadays. They're not necessarily overtly winking at the camera, but like some of the unbelievable stuff that they're doing, where it's like, a tope suicida over the top rope into a group of guys and you spring right back up like nothing happened, nobody's
yeah,
selling,
exactly,
takes you out of it.
exactly. That's it. That's it in a nutshell. It's they've taken that away. It's like, sell it. That's the whole deal. Is if I ever took a bump over the top rope to the floor, I'm going to lay there and sell it. And uh, you know, oh my gosh, I don't even want to. I don't want to get off on it.
Well,
I don't
well,
want to get off of my horse, but yeah, that's what's missing is realism. A real believable match. It's kind of like, it was very, um, it wasn't, it was kind of like, now it would be like, and I know they don't have it. They don't. I don't believe, I haven't seen anybody bleed on TV for a while, and I don't think they have for a long time. But in wrestling, as I knew it, it was like the only time you were going to see two guys bleed or one guy bleed is in a main event, where it's a serious match, like, like a Texas death match or whatever you want to call it. And of course the way we did that was, it was real blood. It wasn't Hollywood blood. You had a little razor blade. Some guys would tape it to their finger, and when it's the right time, you just hit your head a couple times. If you look at my head, there's a lot of, well, you can't hardly see them anymore, but
that
there's,
means you did a good job.
yeah, and you would, if you were gonna bleed, you would take an aspirin because it thins your blood, or maybe a little shot of, I mean, literally a little shot of whiskey or something, because it thins your blood. So when you do it, it it's like, you got a little slice, like with a razor blade, with just the tip of that blade, and it looks like Mount Rushmore. But
Hmm.
when you actually, look at what it is, it's not that much. And the believability's gone. In my opinion, it's just gone. It's just not realistic to me anymore.
And even the blood, it's AEW has blood pretty often. But here's the thing: is if you do blood too often, then blood doesn't mean anything to the audience anymore.
Exactly.
So you really got to kind of walk a fine
Exactly.
line.
Exactly. Yeah. And I don't know if this is still historically true, but my dad and Dory Funk Sr. had a Texas death match in Amarillo, Texas. And the rules of a Texas death match were falls don't count. In other words, you can have 20 falls. So the deal is somebody, it's a fall, one, two, three. Okay, now there's a 30-second, I think it was either 30 seconds, I think it was 30-second rest period. Like after that one, two, three, 30 seconds. And then if you weren't to your feet by the count of 10, you lose. And falls could happen anywhere, in the ring, on the floor, out in the parking lot. I mean, and my dad and Dory Funk Sr. did this for 3 hours and 15 minutes.
Ooh.
And they I think they periodically they sent them back to the dressing room to have a doctor look at them. And I don't know if that was part of the show, probably, but imagine keeping the attention of all those people, just two guys, for 3 hours and 15 minutes. They were letting people in off the street. And the match ended in a draw. Why? Because there was a curfew on the building, and because the police stopped the match because they couldn't, the building couldn't be open to the public past a certain hour.
You put the heat on the police. That's the way.
But I mean, but I mean, again, they bled, and of course, they actually hard weighed each other. It's like, they each took one. Take one for the boss, right? So to
Right.
speak, for the business.
Like a strike down, right? It's you got to
Yeah,
punch down on a guy's eyebrow to get him to
yeah,
bleed. I think
yeah,
that's a
yeah,
technique.
yeah,
Man, bygone era for sure,
yeah,
and
yeah,
certainly, nowadays, if there was a 3-hour match, everybody would tune out. Nobody would be able to sit there. It's
yeah,
it's the age of instant gratification, so
yeah,
we'll never
yeah.
see anything like that again, unfortunately.